Hello, my name is Corbin, and today we are going to be going over the CCSP Chapter 2. First thing we need to discuss is business requirement analysis. In order to know what you're defending, you need to know what data you have in your inventory. You also need to know what assets you have, as well as the valuation of each asset. Determining critical paths to data or processes and procedures is essential for business requirements, and a clear understanding of risk appetite, what kind of risk you're willing to take on, in the end is important as well. All right, so inventorying assets. In order to inventory assets, we have to determine the number, location, and type of all assets. These assets could be tangible, which could be hardware, retail, vehicles, or they could be intangible, such things as software, intellectual property, goodwill with business partners, things like that. And lastly, although misspelled, is personnel. Personnel are considered assets as well because they provide skills, production, and productivity to the business. So the valuation of assets will be done during the BIA, Business Impact Analysis. We're going to determine the value of assets per asset. So one of the principles is no $10 locks on a $5 bicycle. This just means you don't want to put an expensive security control on a less expensive piece of equipment. Now that does have a caveat, however, because that less expensive piece of equipment could be holding priority data or data classified as high priority or highly sensitive. In this case, then yes, you could put a $10 lock on a $5 bicycle, as to speak. All right, we're going to talk again about the BIA. We're going to talk about that a lot, the business impact analysis. This, once again, is going to talk about the financial value of assets when you're valuing the assets, the priority and rank. You're going to go into structure from the highest priority asset to the lowest priority. Then you want to determine what would happen if you lost that asset. That would go in tandem with the replacement cost or insured value of the asset. Generally, data owners make valuations. So the data owner will be conducting valuations in a general sense. The business manager in charge of the data is usually the data owner. They also handle classification or categorization in the creation phase. So next, we're going to determine criticality. This is also part of the business impact analysis process. It's going to denote aspects of the organization which are necessary. They could be tangible assets or intangible assets, business processes, data pathways, or essential personnel. Once the inventory and valuation is complete, the effort continues with the determination. This is made by senior management regarding criticality. Some examples of tangible assets that would be denoted for criticality would be cars that are critical. Actually, I'm going to go over this with you here just shortly. Yep, let's go ahead. All right, so examples, let's go from the book. Examples of criticality are tangible assets. The organization is a rental car company. The cars are critical to its operations. If it has no cars to rent to customers, it can't do business. An example of criticality for intangible assets. The organization is a music production firm. The music is intellectual property of the company. If the ownership of the music is compromised, for instance, the copyright is challenged and the company loses ownership, or the encryption protecting the music files is removed and the music can be copied without protection, the company has nothing of value and will not survive. Processes. The organization is a fast food restaurant noted for its speed. The process of taking orders, preparing and delivering food, and taking payment is critical to its operations. If the restaurant cannot complete the process for some reason, for instance, the register fails so that the restaurant cannot accept payment, the restaurant cannot function. Data paths. The organization is an international shipping line. Matching orders to cargo carriers is critical to its operations. If the company cannot complete its logistical coordination, assigning cargo requests to carriers with sufficient capacity, it cannot provide its services and will not survive. Personnel. The organization is a surgical provider. The surgeon is critical to the existence of the company. If the surgeon cannot operate, there is no company. All right, so those are some examples of different types of criticality that we need to look out for. let's continue with criticality. So once again, senior management makes determinations of criticality. Security professionals all around should be aware of the impacts and valuations of all of the equipment, as well as where sensitive data is. They should also be aware of single points of failure, and we will go over that here just shortly. All right, so single points of failure. Those could be choke points in processes, procedures, or production chains. All work stops when the element is stopped or lost. That's a single point of failure. A significant risk to an organization, and they should be addressed immediately. These are identified during the BIA process, and once they are identified, like I said, they should be addressed immediately. Single points of failure should not be allowed to stay in operation. So how can we handle those SPOFs? Well, we can add redundancies to ensure replacement of service on failure. So if we have a switch that's a single point of failure, we could either add another switch and use a different network topology to ensure that if one switch fails, we have another switch that is able to take on that load. There's also load balancing, things of that nature, which is at the bottom of the screen there. Load balancing can help to ensure that if one server that is critical goes down, you also have other servers that are backups and they balance the load. There's different types of load balancing: active, 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 passive, passive, passive. However, we're not going to be going over these in this study guide. We can create alternative processes to replace single point of failure in time of outage. So that would be like a generator for power, a single point of failure in power. If you only have one power supplier. Cross-trained personnel to fill other roles. This deals with personnel single points of failure. If you have one administrator and no one else is trained and he gets horribly sick, then you have a single point of failure there because no one else can administer your system or your network. Thoroughly and consistently back up data. Ensure it can be quickly restored. Of course, we need to ensure that all data is backed up properly, and you can use different backup plans. But the important portion is that personnel know how to back up the data in real time, or know how to restore the data in real time. Many people do have good backups, and companies do have good backups, but they never practiced restoring the data. So restoring the data ends up taking a long time as the employees don't know what they're going to encounter. Qualitative and quantitative risk assessments. So these are the normal binary for risk assessments. Qualitative assessments deal with quality. They're non-numerical categories like high, medium, or low. There will be you can use a risk matrix to determine if the risk is critical based on the likeliness of the risk and the impact of the risk. These are normal risk impact analysis. However, quantitative risk analysis are also very useful as well. They deal with quantity, use numerical values and data, and they are good for determining actual valuation and impact of an incident prior to it happening. Risk appetite. So risk appetite, this is kind of a funny word, like you want to eat some risk, but that's not what it means at all. Risk is the likelihood an impact will be realized. So that's the definition of risk. This is important for the exam. Risk is the likelihood that an impact will realize. Risk is also threat and vulnerability, the merging of the two, threat and vulnerability. Risk can be reduced, but it can never be eliminated. There will never be a point in time where all risk will be eliminated by an organization's security controls. It is legal to accept risk greater than the norm, or greater than competitors. So if you are providing better controls or the same controls as your competitors, you're probably within the realm of reasonability to where you can accept a little bit of risk. Risk to human health must be addressed and follow industry standards and best practices. Risks to human health are pretty much non-negotiable. You can't accept human health risks unless it's absolutely necessary. It's not the same as a network or a system. There's no risk acceptance when it comes to human health that isn't under industry standards. So some ways of addressing risk. First, you can practice risk avoidance. This would be not taking on a business opportunity because of risk. You're literally avoiding the risk. Risk acceptance is when risk falls within the organization's risk appetite. So the risk can be accepted after security controls are in place. Once the organization feels that they've done their mitigation, they can allow for some risk acceptance. Some risk transference. This is insurance. Same thing as if you're paying your car insurance. You're transferring the risk of an accident to the insurance company, but you're also paying them. So you pay someone else to accept the risk. Risk mitigation. Take steps to decrease the probability and impact of risk. This is hiring security professionals and implementing controls. So, residual risk. This is the leftover risk after applying mitigation measures. An example of risk. So, determine business requirements, an example of a risk analysis process all the way through. Determine business requirements. What does the business need? We've inventoried all of the data. We've done data discovery. Conduct a BIA. Now, using those business requirements and that data discovery, we now conduct the business impact analysis. We value the data. We look at where our single points of failure are, look at the criticality, paths, critical paths, stuff like that. Then you conduct a risk assessment once the BIA is completed and thorough. This will be a knowledgeable risk assessment because you have a BIA to back it. So conduct a risk assessment. You can do qualitative or quantitative, or you can do both within your risk assessment. Now, using that risk assessment, you can select and implement controls. You could use the NIST controls that they recommend. You could use several different controls, or you could develop a framework of your own based on industry standard controls, depending on what you need and your business requirements, your BIA, and your risk assessment. Once that's complete, you can develop a business continuity and data recovery plan. So BCDR plans are in case you actually have any downtime. This could be from an insider attack, a malicious attack, or it could just be from a single point of failure actually failing. You have to have a business continuity and data recovery plan. This will involve ensuring power continues to come up, or ensuring that you still have connectivity, ensuring that if you do lose data, if there's a ransomware attack or just a data corruption, that you can go ahead and pull those backups up and you have a good backup plan. It could be differential, incremental, whichever one you'd like. As long as you have a backup plan and it's able to be used, this would be covered in the BCDR plan. And then you repeat this as necessary. New business requirements, well, guess what? You can add it to your BIA. Then you can ensure that it's conducted. You conducted a risk assessment on it and implement controls on that specific action. Next thing. So, some security considerations for cloud categories. Here's an important note from the book. Currently, according to most of the world's privacy laws and regulations, the cloud customer is always and ultimately legally liable for any loss of data, even in cases of negligence and malice. We've said this in Chapter 1. Once again, this is very important. The cloud customer is ultimately responsible and legally liable for data loss and PII. The cloud customer can, however, seek restitution from the cloud service provider, however, or whoever got breached. But however, they remain legally responsible. All right, let's go ahead to IaaS security considerations. So infrastructure as a service is a cloud model in which the cloud customer has the most responsibility and authority. All right, like installing and administrating the OS and up. Customer themselves will supply and manage all of the data. The provider is responsible for the data center, power, and physical security. The provider will ensure, usually by the SLA, and just as generally accepted, the provider will ensure that the data center is practicing good physical security controls, has redundant power, and has redundant connectivity. The provider will likely not allow the customer to monitor traffic inside the data center or place monitoring equipment. So providers are pretty protective of their data centers, even to their customers. There's a lot of protection from conflict of interest protection from, spilling out intellectual property or trade secrets, these kind of things. They don't want customers getting into their data, even if they've asked for it, usually. That's why auditing is difficult. It's going to be difficult to get a SOC 2 Type 2 report, which is a full report of controls and a timeline. However, a company could get other types of reports. We'll go over those later. Early communications with regulators is advisable for both the customer and the provider. Customer can still collect and review event logs from software, including OS. Yes, indeed, in the IaaS, they control everything from OS up. So all of those logs are theirs. However, they can't get logs from the hypervisor. So the hypervisor is the clouds, and they will have those logs, and they won't release those logs usually. So, platform as a service considerations. Of course, remember, platform as a service means that the provider provides not only the hypervisor, but they also provide, and the storage space on the platform, but they provide the OS. So the provider, therefore, is in charge of the data center, just like they were in IaaS, and loading, maintaining, and administering the OS. This includes patching and updating. Cloud customer still gets to review software events. So anything above the OS, of course, they can review those events and logs. And the customer must ensure that software is up to date and maintained, because that's their software. The cloud provider, once again, is just providing the platform. Software as a service concerns. Of course, now the provider has the most control, because not only do they own the data center and the hypervisors, and now they've loaded on the OS or the server, hypervisor or the server, but now they've loaded on the OS and the software and applications. So, provider has the most control. The customer does not administer the hardware or the software. The customer is still legally liable for statutory and contractual obligations for safeguarding data. And once again, the provider didn't upload the data. They provided all of the platform, the OS, the software. And once the customer uploads the data, of course, it's still their responsibility. So the customer is giving up control in all models. In all cloud migration, you are going to give up some control. And this is because you're trusting your data, your property to the cloud provider. All right, so what's important here is that we ensure the cloud provider performs background checks to avoid insider attacks. Continual monitoring of personnel. Once again, another insider attack control. Extreme physical security measures to ensure that no one walks in and tries to mess with the servers or anything like that. Encryption of data. This should always be done. Data at rest and data in transit should be encrypted properly. And the assignment of contractual liability to the provider. So this is during the SLA process. The cloud provider should have some contractual liability. This helps protect the customer as well. Since they are liable for all of the data, they still need some protection from the provider. So of note, there are no defined mandates or uniform solutions ubiquitous throughout the industry. The residual risk of losing physical access always remains, even when controls are utilized or other risk reduction methods are used. This is from the book as well. Now we're going to talk about design principles for protecting sensitive data. These are going to be some basic secure architectural methods. It's not an exhaustive list, but these techniques will help to harden devices. But these techniques alone will not suffice to protect an organization and its data. Let's start with hardening devices. So, as far as cloud-related devices, you want to treat all cloud-related devices as if they are in the traditional DMZ. These are all internet-facing devices, and as such, should be treated as if they can be accessed or attempted to be accessed by outside actors. The cloud provider should ensure that guest accounts are removed, unused ports are closed, no default admin passwords are left in anything, strong password policies for maintaining strong passwords, such as time limits on passwords, ensuring that they are strong enough, over 16 characters, stuff like that. Admin accounts are secured and logged. Unnecessary services are disabled. Physical access is severely limited. And systems are patched, maintained, and updated according to best practices. This is all basic physical and network security. So as far as the cloud customer, the cloud customer should ensure that all assets in their BYOD infrastructure that access the cloud should be protected with some form of anti-malware, anti-malware security software. The problem is that all these devices involve remote access. So as such, they are also internet facing, and you also have bring your own devices, BYOD. So these are the employees' devices. So they may not have the controls on them that your network does. So ensure that they're protected with anti-malware security software. They have remote wipe lock capability with written permission. Use local encryption. They need to be secured with strong access controls. Employ VPN solutions. This is a big one. You can employ VPN solutions that just go to the company. You can have split tunneling, but you're going to want a VPN solution to ensure that man-in-the-middle attacks don't happen on any company communications, even in BYOD environments. Employ DLP solutions, data loss protection. Another big one. Data loss protection is a fantastic way to ensure no leakage of data. And consider containerization. Containerization is a great way to separate the employee's device and all their data from company data. And it's also a good way to ensure that you can implement security controls within that container that you would like to have. Containerization is one of the best ways in a BYOD environment to ensure security. Virtual devices need to be secured as well as physical devices. Yes, so the virtual devices like VMs, they need to be secured as well. So there are controls for VMs that we'll be going over here shortly. All right, big topic, encryption. So for the encryption for the data center, of course, data at rest needs to be protected. Long-term storage, archiving, and backups, all those need to be encrypted. Virtualized instances, this is one that people could miss. Any instances, saved versions of those instances should be encrypted. Secure sanitization. So for secure sanitization, there's only really one way to do it within the cloud, and that would be cryptographic erasure, also known as crypto shredding. And that's we'll go over that here shortly as well. Communications between cloud providers and users. Create secure sessions and ensure integrity and confidentiality of data in transit using encryption. Now let's go over homomorphic encryption one more time. This is encryption within the cloud, and this is a proprietary or new technology. It's not really being used yet, but it ensures that data remains encrypted, but yet you can access it and use it while it's still encrypted. So this, like I said, this technology is not really out yet, but it's a technology that would be very useful for the cloud, as all data would remain encrypted. There's no need for decryption. You can just use it with the homomorphic encryption. Layered defense in depth. This is a concept that you'll go over in, Security Plus and all that good stuff. An important concept overall for cybersecurity. For the provider, personnel controls such as background checks, continual monitoring, we talked about that, prevent that insider attack. Technological controls such as encryption, event logging, and access control. These are going to ensure that data at rest, data in transit is secure. Event logging ensures that you can catch things pretty quickly. If you do have some kind of anomaly where someone tried to access, or you can even see when people did try to perform like an Nmap scan or all these other things, probing the network and attempt to harden it against what they're trying to do. Access control, of course, you want to ensure that all access is protected properly. This is in the OWASP top 10 for web applications, but it also is a very important portion of protecting an organization. Physical controls, we'll go over those in depth later. Governance mechanisms and enforcement. Of course, you have to have your governance mechanisms And in order for those governance mechanisms to work, you need enforcement, and ensuring compliance is important as well. For the customer, training programs for staff and users, this is integral. Each staff member is a cybersecurity asset if you treat them that way, and it will enhance your security plan. Contractual enforcement of policy. Encryption on BYOD cannot be emphasized enough. Logical isolation on BYOD using containers, isolating customer and company data, as well as customer and company communications is a great idea. Remote access control methods, ensuring that remote access control is encrypted and that you're using secure methods such as SSH or other methods, securing APIs, stuff like that. Exam essentials. So know how to determine business requirements, the function and purpose of the BIA, we talked about that, and how a BIA enables an organization to ascertain inventory, value, and criticality. All right, be familiar with boundaries of each of the service models. We talked about the boundaries of service models, and we talked about the roles and responsibilities. Understand how cloud architecture and design supports sensitive data security. So we talked about hardening devices, encryption, defense in depth, and knowing where to find frameworks, models, and guidance. So what's next? You need to look at the practice questions. I have a link in the description. Watch Chapter 3. That will be coming out pretty soon. Read the book. I can't stress enough to read the book. There are little things that I may have missed or may have not put in here for time's sake. So definitely read the book and then watch these videos to reinforce your learning. And that's it. Links are in the description. If anyone has any comments, wants any additions, please put it in the comments. And thank you so much for your time. I'll see you in Chapter 3.